Hello everyone, I'm going to show you a demo of one of the most commonly performed tasks in Azure Portal, that is creating a virtual machine. So let's begin. Let's go to the Azure Portal. So the URL for Azure Portal is portal.azure.com. So creating a virtual machine, either you can go to create a resource and you can choose compute and select the virtual machine, or get started also shows you most popular tasks that are performed in Azure Portal. However, let's create the virtual machine from the virtual machine tab. So on the virtual machine page, on the top I have a create button. Let's click on create virtual machine. Okay, so I am on the create a virtual machine page. So my subscription name is already selected. Resource group name, let's create a new resource group name. I am going to name it Tech Knowledge. Let's click on OK. Virtual machine name, let's choose TK underscore VM1. Okay, it's fine. So let's choose hyphen. Region, let's leave it as the default one, which is South India. When selecting the region, you should be selecting the region which is closest to your users. If your users are in US, you should be using the US region. Let's say if you are hosting the web server, so the closest region it is, the better latency you will have. So in this case, I'm just using South India because it's a demo VM. Okay, moving on further. Availability option, it's a huge topic. I'll cover this topic in a different video. Image. So image is nothing but the operating system you want to be installed on your virtual machine. So the most common ones are listed here. When I click on see all images, I can see the specific ones. Let's say if I'm looking for Windows 2012 or any older operating system, so that won't show up in the list on the previous page. So we need to go to all images, then select it. So let's say I am looking for SQL 2019 standard on Windows. So let's search what it shows up. It shows me all the images of SQL plus Windows. So the most specific one, let's see. Okay, so here I have a select button. I click on select. It gives me the option to select SQL Server 2019 Web Edition, 2019 Standard Edition. Then I have different OS versions here. So let's select Web Editions. It's just a demo purpose. Moving on to Azure Spot instance. If you check this box, Microsoft will be using their unused capacity for this VM. So the disadvantage of this is if Microsoft requires a capacity, they will evict your VM. So you need to select this only if it's a non-prod VM and you're building the VM for temporary purpose for a few hours, and you have no issues if your data is lost. So most of the cases we will not be selecting this checkbox, so let's leave it at that. Now moving on to the size. So once again, like your image size, the most common ones are shown up here, but let's go ahead and click on see all sizes. So size is primarily a combination of your hardware, your physical hardware. In case of Azure, it would be virtual, but by physical, what I meant is virtual CPUs and RAM. So here you can see, if I say my virtual machine is a DS1 underscore V2 instance, that means it has one CPU and 3.5 GB of RAM. Then there are other parameters which includes in the instance size, that is the number of data disk it supports and the maximum input output per second the VM can perform. Now if we scroll to the right, we can see the cost per month for this VM, and also add to it, this cost is for 720 hours. In a month you have 30 days, 24 hours per day. So this cost is for 720 hours. If your VM was powered on only for 2 hours, you will be charged on pro rata basis for 2 hours only. So this is going to be a demo machine. So let's choose the smallest one. The smallest one is a B1S instance size, which is 1 CPU and 1 GB RAM. And the cost of this is $10.59. So let's select that. And keep in mind, the cost of the virtual machine differs from the region you are selecting. So South India, this is the cost. If you are choosing US, it might be somewhat different. If it's UK or Europe, it might be somewhat different. So there is slight difference. There might be a variation of 5 to 10%, but still again, it depends upon your load you are going to install on your virtual machine. If it's a web server, make sure you are choosing the region of your web server closest to the users so that the latency of your web traffic is as low as possible. So I've selected B1. I clicked on select. So I have my subscription name, I have my resource group name, I have my virtual machine name, I have the region, availability option. Let's choose it as the default one, which is no infrastructure redundancy required. This is my image, this is the size. Then moving on to the username, let's choose TK user 1. Password, let me choose my default top secret password. Okay, moving on to the inbound ports. So by default on your new VM, you are going to RDP. So make sure to enable the RDP port, which is 3389. Then if I'm going to install IIS on it, or if it's a Linux machine, if I'm going to install the web service for Linux, I need to select the specific ports. So by default, it gives me the option to select any of these ports. So let's say it's going to be my IIS server and I'm going to add SSL binding. So I'm selecting 3 of the ports. So moving on to attaching the disk. So another thing to add, when you are calculating the total cost of your virtual machine, it's not the virtual machine cost only. Whenever you create a virtual machine in the resource group, it's going to create the operating system disk, the data disk, the virtual machine, and it's going to create an IP address. You will have a NSG created. NSG are your firewall rules. Then you will have a network card. Okay, so all those will comprise your total VM cost. So if you are keeping your virtual machine in shutdown state, you are saving the cost only for your VM, but your OS disk and data disk and other resources are still going to be charged. Okay, so moving on to the disk. So OS disk, I have 3 options. The lowest cost among the 3 is standard HDD. Then above that is standard SSD, solid state drives. Then we have premium SSDs. So for our operating system disk, the size of the operating system disk is always 126 GB. So this is a demo machine. So let's go ahead with standard HDD. And how much is the price difference? So for that, let's go to another page. When you search in Google for Azure disk pricing, it will take you to this page, which is manage disk pricing. So first one, premium SSD managed disk. So just to give you an approx idea, the cost of a 128 GB disk, 128 GB disk would be referred to as P10, is approximately $18. And then when we look at the same under standard SSD, it's E10 and the cost is $9.6, so almost half of your premium SSD. Then the lowest cost would be for standard HDD, and let's check. So that would be S10 and the cost of a 128 GB is roughly 30% less than your standard SSD. So it is approximately 5.89, and again the cost is specific to the region. In this case we have selected the region as West US. If you change the region to some other country, some other region, you might see a slight difference in the cost, but the cost difference is not much. There might be a difference of say 10%. So let's go back to our creating a virtual machine page. So under the OS type, the next one is encryption type. So PMK, platform managed key, this is a default encryption. Then we can have a CMK. CMK is customer managed key, or we can have both. So let's keep it at default. Let's click on next. So this is my virtual network. I had given a resource group name as technology, so it has automatically created a virtual network with a -vnet extension to it, and it has again automatically created a subnet under that. This is the default IP. So NIC card, I'm keeping the default settings, and remaining settings will remain at the default. So let's go to next. So boot diagnostic will cover in a separate section. Keep it disabled for now. So auto shutdown and everything we will keep it disabled. These are the settings for your Windows update. You want Azure to automatically update your Windows, or you would perform it manually, and we keep it at manual updates. So going further, extensions, let's keep it at default. So these are the SQL settings. If you remember, on the first page I had selected the image as Windows plus SQL. So it wants me to specify the settings for SQL. What sort of connectivity should we have for SQL, and what's the port number for SQL that should be allowed, and what should be the credentials for SQL. If I choose enable, the Windows credentials would be, if you remember, TK user 1, these are the Windows credentials. Those same credentials would be enabled on SQL Studio. So keyboard integration, let's keep it at disabled, and remaining settings, let's keep it all at the default. Now let's go ahead and click on review and create. So this should not take more than a minute. So it has validated the settings. So it's telling me the cost. So standard B1, the cost is 0.0145 USD per hour. So as I mentioned earlier, Azure VMs are charged on hourly basis. So whatever settings I have entered on the previous page, it is just confirming those settings. So that's fine. Let's go ahead and click on create. So creation of VM, I hope it should get done in next 2 to 3 minutes. So let's wait. Then once done, I'll take you to this resource group and I'll show you how many resources are created for a VM. And in fact, you can already see it here. It has created a data disk 0, then it has created a data disk 1. So in the configuration part, I had specified the settings only for OS disk. SQL disk, it has taken the settings automatically. So it has created a IP file, then it has created a network security group, a virtual network. Let's wait. So it's done. It took a long time. It took almost 22 minutes. Started at 7:37 and we are almost at 7:59. So generally it does not take more than 3 to 4 minutes. But in this case, our VM size was small. It was just one vCPU and 1 GB of RAM. And on top of that, we had chosen an image of Windows plus SQL. So there were some additional components to be installed. Okay, so our VM is created. So let's go ahead and check inside the resource group what are the associated components created for this VM. Okay, so this is my virtual network. This is my virtual machine. Then this is the SQL layer of the virtual machine. They're both the same. It's just a layer, the additional layer on top of it. This is the IP address. This is the network security group. That is nothing but the firewall settings. This is my network card. Then these are my disk. So one VM, but in all there are 9 resources. If the same was a Windows machine, NoSQL, it will not create the data disk. It would be 6 resources, data disk minus the SQL layer of the virtual machine. So now let's go to my virtual machine. This is the IP address. I have copied the IP address. When I click on networking, it shows port number 3389, 443 and port 80 has been allowed. If I want to add any additional port, while creating it allowed only adding one of the 4 ports. I'm sorry, only 4 ports, but now I can click on add and I can add any more ports if I want. So now let's log into this VM. So I go to run, I type in mstsc, I type in the VM's IP address which I have copied from here. I click on create. I click on I type in the username. So the username, if I remember correctly, was it tk user 1. So this VM is going to be slow, as I said earlier. It's a one vCPU and 1 GB memory on the server. So let it load. We'll come back to the virtual machine in a minute. So overview tab, I can see my resource group name, my VM's IP address. If this is dynamic, on every reboot it would change. My virtual network and the subnet. Then my disk will show up under here. My OS disk, if you remember, I had chosen standard HDD 127. Then there were few settings about the data disk under SQL. So these are the data disk settings for SQL. Then size, if you remember, I had chosen B1. If at a later point of time I want to change it, I can simply select it here and click on resize. It will automatically upgrade my virtual machine size. So let's go back. Let's see what's the status. Okay, so we are logged into our VM. Let's go to CMD. Let's check what is our host name. tk-vm1. So with this, we are done with our demo on creating a virtual machine. If you found this video useful, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more such videos. Thank you so much for watching.